Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a close look at the blueprints for Singapore's future.
That's right. We've got manifestos from two major political parties lined up.
Exactly. We have the People's Action Party, the PAP, with our manifesto, our promise, and then the Singapore People's Party, the SPP, outlining their vision in Manifesto 2025, It is Time.
So think of this as, well, your quick guide to what they're proposing. We're
Yeah.
covering everything from the economy and jobs to healthcare, housing, the whole lot.
Yeah, we've waded through them to pull out the core ideas for you.
And the PIP's manifesto, it really lays out a comprehensive vision, doesn't it? Building on what they see as their successes.
Right. Aiming for a dynamic economy, opportunities via education, support systems, and a unified Singapore. They're really emphasizing a refreshed team, too.
Ready for future challenges is the message.
Okay, let's unpack the SPP side then. Their manifesto is built around what they call ACE.
Accountability, commitment, and empathy.
Yeah, those are their guiding principles. And their focus areas: economic stability, fairness, jobs, housing, family support. It's quite broad.
Governance, education, healthcare, transport, social cohesion. They cover a lot of ground. And that title, It is Time, definitely suggests a push for, well, change.
A different direction, perhaps. So our mission today is to really dig into the specifics, see what they're actually proposing, where the ideas overlap, and importantly, where they differ.
Absolutely. Let's start with the economy. Their vision's there.
Good starting point. So the PAP.
Well, they're talking about fostering a dynamic economy. There's a specific mention of supporting PMT's professionals, managers, executives, and technicians, and nurturing Singaporean corporate leaders. They also highlight strengthening fair employment, through the upcoming Workplace Fairness Act.
Okay. And maintaining Singapore as a business hub, I assume.
Definitely. Plus, investing in infrastructure, both transport and digital. Embracing tech like AI.
Right. And they even mentioned exploring nuclear power.
Yeah, for clean energy, that's a significant point. And of course, supporting SMEs, easing costs, productivity upgrades, market access. It's quite comprehensive.
Okay. Now, the SPP's economic approach. This sounds quite different on the surface.
It is, yeah. They prioritize what they call economic stability and fairness. Some key proposals: a yearly balanced budget,
Okay. And any surplus?
distributed as CDC vouchers, and interestingly, more for lower-income households.
What else?
They propose a GST freeze, but it's conditional, based on certain deficit thresholds.
Right. Not just a blanket freeze.
Exactly. Also, expanding their living wage policy idea and pushing for progressive taxation.
By means.
Higher income tax for the top 2% of earners, and they want to reintroduce estate duty, to tax on inheritance.
Wow. Okay. That is quite a contrast in their fundamental economic thinking.
It really is.
So what might be the potential impacts of these different philosophies, especially for, the average person?
Well, that's the key question, isn't it? With the SPP, their proposals seem aimed at providing more immediate relief, perhaps.
Like the GST freeze and the voucher distribution.
Exactly. Direct measures that could ease cost of living pressures relatively quickly, especially for certain groups.
Whereas the PK's vision seems more focused on.
Long-term growth, perhaps.
Yeah.
Creating a conducive environment for businesses, investment, global competitiveness. The idea being that this ultimately benefits everyone through jobs and opportunities.
So it's kind of a difference in emphasis, immediate relief versus, say, sustained growth strategies.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. Different priorities, different time horizons, maybe.
Okay. Let's move on to jobs then. Job security, employment, hugely important, the PP's approach.
Their stated aim is generating jobs and opportunities for everyone, with, again, specific mention of more support for PMETs and strengthening fair employment safeguards. It's framed quite broadly.
Right. And the SPP, sounds like they have more specific policy levers in mind here.
They do seem to. They're proposing local hiring incentives.
Such
Could be tax breaks for companies hiring Singaporean PMETs. Also, potentially higher local hiring quotas tied to a raised local qualifying salary.
Okay, that's quite direct. What else?
They want to codify the TAFEC guidelines, the Fair Employment Guidelines, into actual law, give them more bite.
I see.
And flexible retirement, abolishing the statutory retirement age of 63, offering tax incentives for hiring older workers.
Interesting. And they mention CETA.
Yes, reviewing the Singapore-India Agreement.
Yeah.
Also gradually reducing quotas for SPASs and employment passes. Those are the work visas. And encouraging automation, pushing towards a high-skill economy.
So quite a few specific interventions proposed there. How might those, affect businesses?
Yeah.
And the wider economy?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it? It looks like a more direct attempt to sort of rebalance the workforce towards local talent. The potential impacts on business costs, competitiveness, and overall economic structure would need careful consideration.
Definitely. Okay, let's switch gears to housing and retirement. Always massive topics here. PAP's promises on housing.
They're promising continued affordable public housing, reiterating that target of 100,000 new HDB flats between 2021 and 2025.
And more after that.
Yeah, planning over 50,000 more in the following 3 years. They also talk about increasing the supply of shorter waiting time flats.
Which is always popular.
Absolutely. And exploring more options for different groups, maybe higher income couples, singles, acting to stabilize the property market generally, and continuing HDB town rejuvenation, like Sarah's and Viers.
Right, and they introduced that new classification system, too.
Yes, the Standard Plus and Prime HDB framework. That's a big one. It'll likely affect pricing, resale rules, things like that.
Okay, now connecting this to retirement security, what does the SPP bring to the table on housing?
Well, some of their housing ideas link into retirement and maybe even family planning. They advocate for a single citizen HDB scheme, lowering the age to 30.
So letting singles buy flats earlier?
That seems to be the idea.
Yeah.
More housing security earlier on. They also propose expanding Sarah's the En Bloc scheme to all estates nearing their lease expiry.
That would affect a lot of older estates.
Potentially, yes. And they even link housing to having children, proposing second-child housing incentives.
And a third-child benefit. Related to ABSD.
Yeah, potentially helping with the additional buyer's stamp duty on private property, or maybe facilitating an upgrade to a bigger HDB flat.
So it seems both parties see housing as critical, obviously, but their approaches to affordability and access, they diverge quite a bit.
They really do. Thinking about the social impact, too. How these policies might affect the mix in housing estates, social equity. It's complex.
That's a really interesting angle. Okay, let's focus specifically on family support and birth rates now, a major challenge for Singapore. PPA is focus here.
Seems to be on expanding support structures. Things like more parental leave, lower preschool fees to ease childcare costs, enhanced support for larger families, and just generally strengthening marriage and parenthood support programs.
Right, more broad-based support.
Yeah.
And the SPP, you mentioned some direct incentives earlier.
Yes, they seem to be taking a more direct, targeted approach to the declining birth rate. As we said, the second-child housing incentives, the third-child benefit relating to property.
And IVF subsidies, too.
Increasing subsidies for IVF treatments, yes.
Yeah.
These are pretty specific financial levers aimed squarely at encouraging more births.
So that raises a question, doesn't it? The effectiveness of direct financial incentives versus these broader support measures the PP talks about. Different philosophies at play again.
Absolutely. Which approach is more likely to shift the needle on birth rates? It's a big debate.
Indeed. Okay, moving to governance and democracy, the PIP emphasizes what? National unity.
Yes, strengthening unity, upholding multiracialism, multi-religious harmony, enhancing integration. The language is around fostering respect, inclusivity, leaving no one behind.
And refreshing the social compact.
Right, encouraging civic participation, government-people partnerships, strengthening existing structures, essentially.
Now, compare that with the SPP's proposals in this area. Sounds like they're looking at more systemic changes.
That seems to be the case, yes. They're advocating for proportional representation in Parliament.
What should mean?
Potentially a more diverse range of parties and voices represented, based on vote share.
No.
It's a fundamental shift from the current system.
Wow. What else?
The freedom of information law for more transparency, easing defamation laws to encourage, they say, more open public discussion. Also, a yearly 2% budget cut for every Ministry for Fiscal Prudence, fixed election dates.
So no more guessing when the election will be called.
That's the idea. And an independent elections commission, separate from the Prime Minister's office.
Okay, those are some pretty significant potential shifts in the political architecture.
Definitely. These different approaches to governance really touch upon the relationship between state and citizens and the overall political landscape.
Fundamental questions indeed. Right, let's turn to education and youth well-being, the PIP's plans.
They talk about continuing their ongoing education reforms, broadening definitions of success, not just academics.
Customizing education.
Yes, for diverse abilities, investing in teacher development, partnerships with parents, industry, the community.
And support for special needs students.
Plans for 4 new SBD schools by 2030, more early intervention centers. And they also highlight Skills Future for adult lifelong learning.
Okay. What about the SPP's take on education? Any standout points?
Well, they focus on personalized learning through smaller class sizes, that's one thing,
Hmm.
and a modern curriculum emphasizing things like AI mastery, skills-based reasoning, potentially less focus on high-stakes exams, more vocational options,
Interesting. What else?
expanded mental health support in schools and communities, allowing CPF use for overseas tertiary education, though with safeguards.
Using CPF for overseas uni, that's a big one.
It is, and lowering the voting age to 18.
Right. So their proposals seem to target some specific pressures within the current system: exam stress, mental health, skills for the future.
Seems that way, yes. Different philosophies again on how best to prepare young Singaporeans.
Crucial stuff. Okay, mental health is clearly a growing concern. Let's look closer at healthcare and mental wellness proposals. PAP first.
Their focus seems to be affordability through prevention. Initiatives like Grow Well SG, Healthier SG, Age Well SG.
Right, trying to keep people healthy in the first place.
Exactly. Alongside increasing capacity, 13,600 more hospital beds planned, redeveloping Alexandra Hospital, a new Eastern General Hospital by 2030, growing the workforce.
And specific mental health initiatives?
Yes, establishing a national mental health office,
Hmm.
increasing access to services, building capacity in that area.
Okay. And the SPP's healthcare proposals.
They also hit on affordability and access, subsidies for telehealth, especially for the elderly and low income.
Making remote consultations cheaper.
Seems so. Expanding Medisave use higher withdrawal limits for preventive care and mental health treatment specifically.
Using Medisave more for mental health.
Yes, and enhancing elder care support, subsidizing aging in place, capping out-of-pocket costs for seniors.
And on mental wellness specifically.
They propose integrating mental health support into polyclinics and even national service, 5 days of unpaid mental health leave for workers, and a rehabilitation focus for offenders with mental health issues.
So both parties clearly see healthcare, including mental health, as vital. But again, slightly different strategies and emphasis.
Definitely. Different ways of tackling affordability, access, and integrating mental wellness into the broader system.
Right. Let's shift to transport, how we get around. PP's focus.
Faster, greener, more seamless commutes. That's the headline. So building new MRT lines, Jurong Regional, Cross Island. Extending existing lines
The goal being.
to get 8 out of 10 households within a 10-minute walk of a train station. Plus, expanding bus services. They also mentioned green initiatives, more parks, waterfront development linked to flood resilience.
Okay. And the SPP's transport priorities.
They seem to really emphasize reliability and affordability. Heavy investment in maintaining the existing MRT network.
So less focus on expansion, more on upkeep.
That seems to be a key difference, yes. Also proposing subsidized travels for low-income groups and silver support recipients.
Making fares cheaper for some.
Yes. And on the green front, they want an expedited transition. Full public bus electrification by 2033.
Which is faster than the current plan, right?
Yes, the PP's target is 2040.
Yeah.
So SPP wants to speed that up considerably.
Okay, so expansion versus reliability and a faster green transition. Interesting trade-offs there.
Potential trade-offs, definitely. Balancing new infrastructure with maintaining what we have and the pace of electrification.
Okay, finally, let's touch on social cohesion and national identity. Crucial for Singapore. The PP's approach.
Strengthening Singaporean identity, upholding multiracialism and multireligious harmony, enhancing integration, building a society based on respect, valuing everyone, leaving no one behind.
Through that refreshed social compact idea.
Right, encouraging giving, civic participation, working within established frameworks.
And the SPP, how do they approach social cohesion?
They seem to link it more directly to tackling broader social and economic issues.
Such as?
Proposing a minimum wage, they suggest around $1,500 a month. Measures for wealth redistribution, more tax relief for lower income, higher taxes at the top.
Boosting CDC vouchers again.
Yes, specifically for low-income households. Enhanced caregiver support, paid parent care leave, subsidized elder-friendly housing.
And NS reforms.
Yes, reducing the duration to 18 months and raising allowances significantly to 80% of regular pay.
So their approach seems to be that addressing economic disparities and providing more social support will, in itself, strengthen social cohesion.
That appears to be the underlying logic, yes.
Yeah.
Tackling inequalities is a pathway to national unity. Different means to a similar end, perhaps.
So wrapping this up, we've covered a lot of ground. The PP's manifesto, it seems to emphasize, well, continuity and growth.
Yeah, building on existing strengths, economic dynamism, major infrastructure projects, maintaining social harmony through established means.
While the SPP's It Is Time manifesto really pushes for more focus on fairness, stronger safety nets.
Definitely. And quite a few specific democratic reforms, plus directly tackling cost of living concerns. It's a clearer call for change.
And we saw some really intriguing specifics, didn't we? Like the PAP looking into nuclear energy, that new HDB classification.
And from the SPP, that idea of a GST freeze tied to budget deficits, the call for proportional representation, those direct birth incentives, lots of distinct proposals.
Absolutely. So whether you're, a PMET thinking about your career path, a single person trying to buy a flat, parents planning a family, or just concerned about how Singapore is governed.
These manifestos offer concrete ideas, things that could really impact your life directly.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Hmm.
Considering these different visions, these different approaches we've discussed.
What single policy shift, if you had to pick one, do you think would make the biggest difference in creating a Singapore that's both more economically dynamic and more socially equitable?
It's a tough balance, isn't it? These manifestos lay out different paths, different priorities. We hope this deep dive has given you a solid foundation to think more about these ideas and what resonates most with your own vision for Singapore's future.